Hi, and welcome to this Empower Online session. I am Ton Kastele, and in this one we will go over dashboard essentials. So we'll take a look at what dashboards are. We'll see some examples, and then we'll also find how to navigate inside the dashboards. At that point, I think we will be ready to do an exercise, and then we will go over to sharing and reporting as well, which is where you can earn some DevOps points on top of that. Finally, we'll also take a look at how security works specifically for dashboards, how permissions work there, and then if you find the time, if you want to, I'll give you a bonus exercise to do on your own time. Right, so what are dashboards? Let's first take a look what dashboards is comprised of. Dashboards is a web application with which we can build dashboards to visualize any type of data, to have a big library of visualizations to choose from. And this with the full DataMiner context. So the security is enforced. You'll see that it has real-time updates. So if you want to visualize an alarm on your dashboard or a device, you will see that the alarm also updates if needed. Then you also see that we can take reports out of it, but we also have sharing, cloud sharing nowadays, which is very interesting as well. So when we say visualize any data, how do we do that? Well, we have a drag and drop design. We'll see in the exercise how that works exactly, where you combine your data with your visualization. But you can also query data with GQI, data coming from DataMiner, but also data coming from anywhere else. We'll see that there are real-time updates, as I already mentioned, sharing, permissions. We have customizable themes as well, so you can really make your dashboard look the way you want it to, theme to your company or whatever you prefer. So let's make it visual a bit. Some examples we have here. This is a very straightforward one. It's an alarm report. At the top, you can find the last 24 hours, last 7 days, last 30 days. If you click those buttons, immediately the dashboard updates, and you'll see a history of that time range. And at the bottom, you'll also see the top 5 most in alarm state devices and the top 5 with the most alarm events on your devices. A very different example here is the flow monitoring, where you can basically see how our network is laid out. So we have the highlight of it is an automatically generated node edge component where we just feed it the data table, and then we can visualize all of the nodes and its connections between those nodes. But then you also have some extra information at the top and some filtering possibilities at the left. This is another example of that. Here the filtering is a bit more precise, and you have a bit more real estate for your network itself. Another example is the Windows host. So this is basically a dashboard that gives you an overview of all of your Windows servers, but also allows you to drill down into a specific one. So at the top, you'll find some information on all of the servers, so that's here. But then you'll also see that the servers, the list of servers is laid out on the left. And if we click one of those icons, we get an updated view of the dashboards on the right here. So those are some examples, and we'll now see how we can navigate inside Dashboards app so you can really get to it and you can get empowered. So first off, before we get here, we need to know where to go. And I'll go to my browser for that. Here I have my DataMiner as a service system. So this one is called TCA, that's me, Ton Kastele Empower. I can find that one under my organization, just click the home button and it takes me right here. So if you have a DataMiner as a service system, you can do it like that, or you can just directly enter the URL of your agent. I click dashboards, and the first time I open dashboards, I want to start with a blank one, and I immediately get prompted to do so. So that's what we see here. And I can click this button, and it gives me a pop-up. And in the pop-up, I can enter the name of my dashboard. I will be making a dashboard that shows information about my DataMiner agent. And I can choose to put it in a certain folder. So we can have a folder structure here. So let's say I have a folder named Microsoft. Of course, I don't have to enter it here, but I have to add the folder first. And then it gets selected. And I can also already configure some basic security where I can say, okay, this one is public, anyone can edit it, or it's protected, I can edit, everyone can see it, or it's private and only I have access in any way. So I'll start with protected and we'll create. And we immediately go into the editing mode of the dashboard. But before we do that, I want to show you where it ended up. So I will go to the top right here and stop editing. In here, we can find our folder in the side panel. And then in here, we have the dashboard. You can also take a look at the recent dashboards you have visited through the button on the left. All right, so let's take a look at our slides again. So this is where we created the dashboard. And then as you can see here, this has a bit more folders so you can get a clear view of what that folder structure looks like. We go to start editing, and then we can take a look at where we find the visualizations. So here, I can go into start editing. And right now, I don't see this panel that you see here in the slide. But it's actually located here under the green sidebar. You see the little plus icon. You can hover over that. And this one shows all of our different visualizations. So you can collapse the different sections. You can have a browse. You can see what the new visualizations are that we introduced in later versions. But you can also search for things like a state component. If I enter that, it gives me this list of state components that we can have. And then on the right-hand side, we have the data panel. So in the data panel, we can see all of the different types of data that we have that you can actually add to a visualization. So those are the two things we're going to be combining in this session. The data panel has 3 tabs. So first off, you have the data itself, but then depending on whether you selected a component, a visual, or if you are on the background, so if you have not selected anything, you will also find the layout and the settings tab. Now in the layout and settings tab, you can tweak certain parts of your dashboard. If you are on a component, you can tweak that specific component, or you can select a theme for your full dashboard if you have not selected anything. And then we also have the settings, where you can change some settings for your component again or for your dashboard. So let's also take a look at what we have in the layout here. So here we have the theme actually that we can select. So we have some pre-made themes that are shipped with your DataMiner system. So a light gray theme, a light white theme, a dark theme. Those are the main ones. And then in the settings, you can also find settings for your dashboard in general. The fit to view is an interesting one. Normally, if you have a dashboard, you can lay out your components in any way you like. You can have a scroll bar if you want to. But you can also say, I want my dashboard to always use the full screen capability. And then it will not have a scroll bar, but everything you configure on your dashboard will fit onto your screen and will scale accordingly. The polling timers, these are not that important for this example. At the top here, we also have a small button called Show Grid. If we click that, we can actually see how the components are laid out, so what our grid looks like. Right, okay. On the component itself, we'll see that we also have hover actions. So you can actually change the visualization of the component, for instance, but keep the same data. Or you can say, I want to keep my visualization, but I want to change the data, or I want to duplicate the component is also an option. And from here, you can also remove it. The little info icon here takes you to the documentation for that specific visual. All right, enough talk, let's do an exercise. So if you have not done this yet, please open your dashboards app through your homepage of your agent, create a new dashboard, and then you can enter a name, put in a location, set the first security, and then click create. If you have not done that yet, please pause the video here, and then we can keep going. Right, so we've created our dashboard, and the first thing we're going to do to make a visualization is to actually add a state component. And I want to show the state of the only element I personally have in my system, which is a Microsoft element that monitors the agent itself. So it's a Windows monitor, Microsoft platform. So let's take a look. So we can actually choose how we start. We can start from the data side and say, okay, I will put some data on my dashboard and then choose a visualization that fits. Or I can start from the visualizations, which is what I'm going to do first. And I will take the state. Again, you can search this if you cannot find it at first. This state component here, and I will drag it onto my dashboard. I can resize it with the handles at the sides. And then a very useful tip here is to actually click this little data icon. And what you will see then is that it highlights things on the right that can be added to a state component. So not everything makes sense to add as data to a state component, but an element does. And in my elements, I can actually find my DataMiner agent, which is an element, and then I can either click, drag, and drop it onto my component. I could also click it and then click this data icon here. And in any case, I then get my current state for my agent. Now, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tweak this a little bit. So I'm gonna select the component. So remember earlier, if I had not selected anything, if I click the background, you can see the layout is about my entire dashboard. If I click the component, the tab changes, and actually I get the layout for this specific one. I can customize what it looks like here, so you get the theme components in the component themes in here. I can say, okay, I don't want to show the protocol, so you'll see that this one disappears then. I want to auto size my component. I will leave the alignment and I will add a line rather than an LED for my layout. So there you go. If I now resize this a bit further and I stop editing, you'll see I have my first component and it actually shows the alarm state and the name of the element. Now, like I said, if that alarm state were to change, the powerful thing about this is that it always follows the data from DataMiner. So when a new alarm comes in, you'll see that reflected in your dashboard here as well. All right. So again, if you're not completely up to speed yet, pause the video here if you want to play around with the layout as well, and then we can continue onwards. The next thing we will do is to add a state timeline, so it's basically the exact same thing. But instead of using the state component, we will use the state timeline component. So this time around, I'm not going to show it first. So please pause here, try to add a state timeline and add that same DataMiner agent element onto it. All right, if you have done that, you should have something like this. I will show a very quick way to do this. I will duplicate my component rather than adding one. And then through the visual drop-down, I will change this to a timeline. There it is, state timeline. And now I have a timeline for the last 24 hours of my element. I only started this DataMiner as a service this morning, so that's why you're seeing a lot of gray zone here, because the element did not exist yet then. If I go to the layout tab here, I can again customize my item, but that's not important for this one. There, we already have two components. On to the next one, we will add a line chart. So here, a bit more steps because we actually want to choose a specific parameter here rather than a full element. So I'll walk you through how to find that parameter. That's the most important part. The line and area chart component is another visualization, which you should be able to find quite easily. So here I will show the total processor load of my element. I will add a title. I will remove the automatically added title, and then we can also change the trend time span. So let's do that. Go into edit mode again. I will search for the line chart component. There. I will give it a certain size. And then if I click the data icon again, I can see here what parameters I have. And I want to find the total processor load. So if you have multiple elements, you'll see that this one is not yet selected. So you need to find your element in here. Of course, I advise you to work on a DataMiner as a service system for this. Makes it way easier to follow along. You'll have the same exact element. But if you have deployed packages on there already or have added elements, you'll need to select your DataMiner agent element in the dropdown. I will add the total processor load, so I will search here, and when I start searching, it does not actually show my parameter yet, but it shows the pages which have a parameter with this name. So if I open it up here, you can see it actually filters completely, and I have the total processor load parameter here. We'll drag and drop it, and there we have our trend chart. Now let's make some tweaks. Select the parameter, the component I mean, go to layout, and here I can actually go to styling and information and elect to not show the title. So if you don't have a lot of screen estate, this is one thing you can do to kind of increase that. But I just mainly want to add a different title rather than the default one. So I will just enter CPU load, and you see it gets the new title. It also takes a bit less space than when we do it with the show title here. So that's a nice benefit to have. Another thing I want to do, and for that I need to go to the settings tab, is change my default trending time span to last 6 hours. This way I only see the data I have from the last 6 hours, which means, given that my DataMiner system is not that old yet, it now gives a nicer graph. Right, so again, feel free to pause, and when we're done, we can continue to the next exercise. Again, one for you to do at your own speed, adding a gauge component with the exact same parameter, and adding a title to that gauge, and then also a layout tweak where we will remove the parameter name. Right, So when you've done that, I will quickly do it as well to make sure we have the same visualization, the same dashboard to go on. This time around, let's start from the data side maybe. I'll go to the parameters and I'll find my total processor load. Of course, I can also take it from here. Given that it's already used in my dashboard, I have this nice overview at the top where I can just use it from there. But let's say it's the first time I add this data. I will start by adding the data onto the dashboard. So now I have no visualization yet, but I do have the data. So what we can do now is actually pick a visualization by clicking here and then finding in my hover menu the right visualization. If I hover over them, you can see the different ones show up. This is the gauge, so let's click that one. Again, I will give it a title and I will remove the parameter name. And that way I should have this result. All right, so that's our result for our basic exercise. We've added 4 components already in the nick of time and quite quickly. So yeah, it's really powerful, it's really quick, it's easy to use, and we have a very nice dashboard already that we can start sharing with others maybe. But we'll see that in a second. Next, we'll see how we can actually make our dashboard interactive. So now we have a dashboard. Every time we open it, it shows the same data. But what if I want to show different parts of my agent, different parameters, but I don't want to list in a scroll viewer or something my entire list of parameters and all of their trend charts? No, I want to select the parameter and then I want another component to show, for instance, the state of that one. All right, so this time around we'll add a state component, a list component, I mean. So I'll go to the edit mode and below my trend graph, I will search for the list and I will drag it on here. Now the list is where we will select what we want to see. So I'll check what data I can add to the list. It's a lot of things. So right now I will go to the parameters and I'll start adding some memory parameters. So in my performance page here, if I enter memory, I can find some things like the available physical memory. I will drag that one on top and you see my list gets populated. Now what's very, very useful is we can add multiple parameters here. So pay close attention, there's a bit of a difference here. If I click this parameter and I then click the data icon, it replaces my previous parameter, which means I will not have both the available physical memory and the total one, I will only have the total. So if I want to avoid that, I can either click the plus here, or I can drag it to add it onto the list. So you can see here in the background, it gets added to my list. So I'll add 2 more. I'll also add the free virtual memory. And then by clicking the plus, for instance, I'll add the total virtual memory. So now I have a list of 4 parameters and I want to see their values. So I will add another component, which is the state. And now the trick will be to not just use a fixed data type. Well, the type will be fixed, it will be a parameter, but I will use component data rather than data I have selected manually. So I collapse the parameters and I scroll up here in my data and I go to components instead. And here I can find my list of components that I already have that expose some type of data to my dashboard. So one of them is not the list. Why not? Because I have not selected anything. Given that the list wants to or can give you its selection as data to use, I need to have a selection before I can actually start using it. So now if I click one of these to select it, I can see my list shows up here. And if I open it up, I see what does this list expose? It exposes selected items. And of those things, I can select the parameters. I drag it onto this state component. Let's also change the layout a bit to auto sizing with no alarm state coloring. And I can see it shows me the value of what I have selected here. I can also multiple select here by holding Control, and then you'll see it actually adds extra parameters to this state. So this is just an example. Of course, once you start making these dashboards, you'll probably want to make bigger lists where you can then select any number of parameters you want, or you can actually link this to a line chart where I can select a parameter and it automatically updates the line chart next to it. So very powerful things you can do with this interactivity. You have many more things that you can use the selection from. So we use the list now, but you can also use a tree view. You can also use parameter picker. There's a lot of options. I suggest go out there and take a look at them. But for now, feel free to pause here. Make sure you are on track for this exercise. Now that we've done that, you can earn some DevOps points. If you have this dashboard with our state component, our timeline, the line chart, the gauge, and then also the interactivity between the list and the state component next to that, take a screenshot of it, upload it here onto this course, and then you will be rewarded 75 DevOps points. All right, so don't forget it. If you think you're going to forget, pause the video now, do that upload, and then you already have your points. And we can take a look at some extra things we can do with our dashboards. Next thing we'll take a look at is sharing and reporting. You have made your dashboard, but you're making it for other users with access to your system. Then you can use the link of the dashboard, of course, to share it with them. If they have access to your DataMiner system, that's easy for them to do. What is also historically often used is email reporting. For that, it's less about interactivity, but actually we want to say, okay, I want to send a PDF report to this person or this group of people that shows the current state of my system. But then the very interesting one is even if the people that you want to share with don't have access to your DataMiner system, they are not on the same network, or you don't want to give them access, even though you're cloud connected, you can do it through a cloud share. So let's take a look at how that works. It's fairly straightforward. If I stop editing, I have the 3 dots here on the right. If I click this, I can see some options. I can clear the selections. I can create that PDF that I was talking about. Note I don't have a preview here. It says why. We are using stacked components and we want to avoid loading too much data if I disable this. You see it also does not show the list because that does not really make sense in a report. But it shows the other things. In a preview I can then change some things, tweak it so it has a logo and info, and generate my PDF. But more interesting is the share button here. Here I can copy the link to the dashboard. I can choose to embed this dashboard, which means if I enable this, the URL slightly changes, and I won't have the header, the side panel, things like that, you'll just have a dashboard. So that's nice to embed and show on a screen or something. And then I can use uncompressed URL parameters if I want to tweak things like selections that are in the URL. But I'm here for the cloud share, and then I will click this button to create a share. Now note, this keeps spinning, but it says if nothing has been opened, click here. You can do that, but also the reason for that is because my pop-ups are blocked. So make sure to allow those pop-ups. And then you will eventually arrive on this page where again you can log in. And once you've done that, you can share your dashboard with someone. You can enter an email address here. I will just share it with myself. I can name it, can give it a different name. So for instance, it's clear that it comes from this system. I can give it a description, and I can also add a message to the share mail that will be sent. You can also add an expiration date here and say, okay, I want this dashboard to expire next week, for instance. And then finally, you click the share button. And it gives you the spinner. And finally, it says, your item has successfully been shared. Now, where do you find the share? Of course, on the dashboard itself, we can now see an icon here where you can see this is shared. And if I click it, I go to my share management, so I can actually delete it or update the expiration date or something else. And another place you can find it is in your admin page. I can find my system here, and I can click the outgoing shares. And there I can see this share as well. Right, so now anyone, even if they do not have access to your DataMiner system as a whole, can access those shared dashboards and access that information. So that's a very, very powerful feature if you are cloud connected. So recapping where you can find this, feel free to try it out for yourself, share it with a friend or with your own email address. Follow the steps you see here, and feel free to slow down the video or pause it whenever necessary. Export as PDF, we also saw earlier. And then the final thing we'll take a look at is the permissions. So we actually added permissions at the start when we created our dashboard. We'll see now that you can actually do much more with your permissions. So rather than just setting it to private or protected or public, you can also set permissions on the dashboard itself, but also on folders as a whole. And then you can tweak what users, groups have what permissions if they can edit or view the dashboard. So where do we find this? In our side panel of the Dashboards app, you can right-click on a folder or on a dashboard, go to Settings, and then here you can change the name, of course, but you can also change the permissions. Now for this folder, everyone can see it currently, and everyone can add dashboards to it or change its name. Let's say I only want to allow myself to do that. I can add myself here. Note, before I do that, I get a warning that at least one user or group should be an editor, and I cannot apply this. Because of course, then no one can change this folder anymore or remove it. So I will add the admin user, which is the one I'm currently logged in with, as an editor. Now, important to note is I can also add a group, for instance, not this one, but this group with 2 users. And important to note is that you always have the highest amount of permissions that is configured here. So let's say I set myself here as a viewer and I set the administrators group as an editor. Now note, it says you have users or groups with higher rights within a parent group. These rules will be ignored when saving this. So what does it do? It always takes the largest amount of rights of your entire combination. If I give everyone editing rights, it does not matter what I enter here, everyone will have edit rights. Even if I'm my admin, I say he's a viewer, he will still have edit rights because of this one. All right. So let's do it like this and apply. So that's the permissions. So you can really tweak those things to get exactly what you want security-wise. Of course, the security from DataMiner is also applied. So seeing the dashboards app to begin with, being able to log in, being able to see info for certain elements. Let's say you automatically list up the elements in your system. If a user cannot see some of the elements, he will not be able to actually see them in the drop-down there in dashboards either. So all those things, all that security is also applied. So this is a small recap. When we were editing, we were able to, creating it, we were able to set the security. We can also change the permissions through the settings. And then that's your dashboard essentials. If you feel like having some fun tweaking some theming, like the colors, things like that, or adding some more components, like adding a trend statistics. This is a kind of reference dashboard that you can make with what we have now on our system. So we have a parameter table here as well, and some nice changes to the styling. So feel free to have fun with it, see where it takes you, and have fun creating dashboards. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.